Hey, what's up, everybody? You tuned in to another episode of Strategic Moves. I'm your host, Kenn Dowell. This is a place where we bring art, culture, politics, and business all together, and we do it every week right here on this podcast. But when I'm not shooting this podcast, I am the owner of Strategic Resources, where we specialize in political campaigns, government, and public relations. I've been doing it around this whole city and this nation for over 20 years, and I want to make your next move a strategic move. And this program gives me an opportunity to do just that. I bring on some of the people I've met. We talk about some of our experiences, and maybe just something out of that you will get that can help you in your business or your personal life. So, if that sounds like something that you're interested in, all I need you to do is hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and the notification bell as well, so that you will know the next time this program is coming on. So, without that, we're going to get started right into our program today. Before I get going, though, on that program, I want to give a shout out to our podcast producer who helps put this whole program together, DJ True. What's happening, brother?
What's going on with you?
Everything's good. Everything's good. You got my man in the studio today.
What's going on? Oh yeah, you got your player partner in the studio.
You already
got your player partner in the studio today.
It's just one of those ones that we needed to do this show like on a Friday night.
Yeah, Friday Night Lights.
Yeah, this was Friday night. This should have been what they call
Friday
strategic moves
dark.
after dark.
It's Chico After Dark over here.
Oh yeah, but we're gonna do a good show today because he's here actually to take care of some business. Okay. So we're going to help him take care of some business, and he's going to always come back to kick. He comes over the house, everything. So I see him all the time. So it ain't no big deal, but I would love to really have a serious conversation with him.
That's right. It's time to get serious.
It's time to get serious. So we're going to try to have a serious conversation with my man.
To handle. Business.
So, everybody, we're going to get started on this program. We ain't going to mess around. We have a gentleman on our program. I'm going to read my little thing because I wrote something on Mr. Cordell here. What we got here? All right, let me boom. We are honored to welcome Cordell Stokes, son of Cleveland's first African-American Mayor Carl Stokes and the nephew of former Congressman Louis Stokes. Cordell carries forward his family's extraordinary legacy while carving his unique path in business and community development. We're going to explore his experience of growing up as part of Cleveland's most iconic political family and how he worked to empower communities today through initiatives and Greater Cleveland Works and his leadership in workforce development. So, not only he's a friend, he's a really good friend of mine. He's a friend of the family. He's a good guy. Met him a long time ago, and we done been through a couple of struggles together and a few fights out here trying to do things right. And I really appreciate him coming on the show and appreciate him as a person. So everybody, let's give a warm welcome to Cordell Stokes to the show. There he is. What's happening, brother?
Man.
Oh, brother, we love to have you on here, man. I'm glad you came on to the show today, Cordell. Well, man, we going to sit back, and I got some questions for you. I'm going to get into all of those. But, brother, tell me, how's your mental today?
How's my mental?
How's your mental?
I guess keeping it real, though, Ken, first of all, it's lovely when I'm in the environment like here with you and the family, strategic resources. And then every time we're always together, whether watching the football game like a couple of weeks ago, eating together, having some libations. And always, the one thing we always do is talk about the dynamics of the city.
That's correct.
But I am a little bit interested in what's going to transpire after January 20th. And
on a national or a local level?
On a national.
On national
and
level,
I think you know where I'm going with the election of Donald Trump. The other thing is, I watched today, what's his name, going up for defense secretary. That was a bit to listen to him. So I think that from a woman's standpoint, from a minority standpoint, from LGBT and all the other communities that you can align with that, I think that there's something to be a little bit concerned about going on after January 20th in order to observe and see who's going to actually be in the leadership positions of each of these cabinet capacities, which really are going to have some serious impact long term.
And I think you're very right on with that. I think that what's going on in the nation right now, and I did a show this morning where we talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. and how all of those programs are now being put to the side. They're closing them down, people changing their minds about doing them. Organizations and company are dumping their DEI policies. And those DEI policies actually affect what we're even talking about as it relates to workforce development, small businesses, and companies that are out here trying to do that. To your point, I think we all need to be aware of what's going on and pay attention to what's going on, because it may get a lot worse before it gets better.
Potentially, that's what I said. We just keep an eye in observance. And hopefully the necessary guardrails will be prominent enough that when it's necessary, they'll be able to handle the job and be able to diffuse things that would be to a detriment to our country.
So, Cordell, your father and your uncle were two of Cleveland's most revered figures. What was it like growing up in a household so deeply entwined in history and as a public servant? Well, and I'm going to break it down to our kind of question that I would ask you if it was.
Go ahead.
Man, how was it growing up in a family where everybody, that's the spotlight on you? Give us your background. You the youngest of the kids? You were the oldest boy? What was the makeup?
I was the youngest, but the dynamic is extraordinary because you are talking about two black men who grew up in different capacities individually from the way that they were built as individuals. Now, very much aligned from a family standpoint, but you had my grandmother raising them in the projects at a very detrimental time economically, et cetera. That you even have Sarah Harper and many others that grew up at the same time down there in the project. But the projects at the same time became almost a saviorship from a ability to have a home of decency compared to where a lot of them were deriving from. In particular, for my father and my uncle, they were coming out of 69th and Quincy in extraordinary conditions like many others around them. And the projects or the public housing at the time, first of their kind, provided some sustenance and ability for people to be able to have the ability to sleep independently a little bit more, have heat, etc., all the other types of resources you need to try and survive and be someone. Now, it wasn't perfect, but it did provide for a greater neighborhood. But getting into the core of your question, sometimes when you're so close to things, you don't really realize. In my instance, now, I love my mother, had a great mother. She birthed me. She was the first lady here in the city of Cleveland, exacted herself with extraordinary behavior and attributes and leadership. But in the end, as a young man, my father and my uncle had custody of each of their kids. And so for us, in particular, when he finished his second term in 71, we moved to New York. And New York was a whole total different city from what it is today. And that is not on the positive side. That's very much on the negative side. And so for my father having me as a young man, I had to deal with the streets right off the top. And so he had to spend the time to really...
What you mean by that, Cordell?
Well,
we're going to get into it. I know you told me. We're going to get into it.
Yeah.
So tell me, what you mean you had to deal with the streets?
You had to deal with the everyday living. He was, at that time, he was the first black anchor of a major news network, him and Paul Udell, on Channel 4 in New York. And so New York was and still is a major city. And he didn't have the time to take care of me like, hey, I'm going to walk you to school. I'm going to do it. No, I had to get on the subway or a bus and travel 13 to 15 blocks to my elementary school and the whole nine. And then you had to deal with all the elements of the 70s.
So you're going to tell me, because I know you, and people don't know you like me, so I can go through. So you're going to tell me New York was the city that did it for you? I thought it was Cleveland. No.
I tell you what, no, actually, Cleveland was a different segment.
Okay.
But the basis, if
you was older,
if you ever watched
right?
the original movie, The Warriors.
Okay.
So we just keep it real. That was the first time I was ever arrested in my life in the fourth grade.
In New York?
In New York. And it was all built around when Cyrus was at the very front end of getting all the gang members together, we cut school in order to participate in the whole nine. Things went left. That's all.
Wait. So you saying it was the movie? I remember the movie.
This is what I'm telling you.
So you cut school because you went to go be a part of the movie? Is what you saying?
It was right there. Listen, when you had the very beginning of the Warriors, where Cyrus had everyone come together, that is exactly where we cut school to observe. And ultimately, here's the crazy part. In the fourth grade, they handcuffed all of us, all three of us. B, George, and Calvin. Never forget. We had some Schaefer beer.
Y'all was doing more than going to the
corner store. That, as a matter of fact, I'm giving you some real love. You remember Pancho?
Yeah.
Chips? Pancho used to go to the same store. Yeah, Harry Belafonte used to be in the community and the whole. We had, New York was a melting pot. We had the projects right down the street. It was in the very apartment complex where we used to really participate across the street on our dead-end street. This is when we were on West 72nd. That became Trump Towers later on, one of Trump's properties. So, yeah, there's a lot of...
Was there any pressure, though? Did you feel any pressure that, man, or do you feel like I just was doing who I am?
No, here's the one thing, and that's what I said to you. I was groomed totally different from my brother and my sister.
Okay.
And I was totally different from all my first cousins, who is no knock. It was just what it was. My father was an individual who was a part of the streets when he grew up.
His campaigns was based off of that. When people talk about it, that's what they said.
And so with me, he took a particular interest to make sure that I was prepared for his perception of what I would have to deal with in the streets.
Okay.
And then, of course, athletics, all that came with it. He spent hours and hours. He put a lot of time into me. Working as the first anchor, listen, if I got sick at work, he would come get me in the street team from Channel 4. And I would ride with him. If we had to go to jails for him to do interviews, or even as much as Paul Robeson, when James Earl Jones was representing, was acting in New York, representing James Earl Jones, I was there. And at the same time, when we went in the back room, my father won an Emmy Award for that. But in the back room, all I could think about was Star Wars and Darth Vader. And so I asked James Earl Jones, would you do Darth Vader's voice? And he did it for me. No different from when we had Piece of the Action with Sidney Poitier and Bill Cosby. Right. I was there. So I was and then, of course, going into Harlem, where I used to get my hair cut. That's where Boudini, who represented Muhammad Ali, we all got our haircuts up there in Harlem. So what happened downstairs was a whole different element. But I was brought into the environment at the nth degree of what the streets were.
In the city of New York. New York City, or where was you at?
New York, which is Manhattan.
All this time we've been dealing, I never knew that. See, you gave me something out. I always thought you were right here in Cleveland this whole time you grew up. So how long did you stay in New York?
Till I was about 13, 14.
Really? So you went there to middle school, just about, right?
Since I was 3 years old.
So what was it like to transition back to Cleveland then?
We would always come back to Cleveland because you have to remember my uncle was serving in Congress. Right. So there was the definite attachment. If you recall, in 1971, my father's concept of starting the 11th Congressional Caucus. First of all, it actually started talking about establishing a district from which constituents, well, it was the 21st, I'm sorry, I said the 11th.
Yeah, it was the 21st.
Later, but initially. And at the same time, you remember his whole mindset was we need to be in a position to elect an individual of color to a district. And that's where he had my uncle, who was at that time the NAACP legal representative, along with Jason Lucas's grandfather, Charles Lucas. Not his dad. I'm talking about his grandfather.
Wow.
Who was Republican. And they worked that case all the way to the Supreme Court.
That's correct.
But by the time that they were able to get it through Supreme Court and approved, my father had already been elected mayor. And so from his standpoint, he didn't need to run for Congress. But that was his initial intent.
To run for Congress.
To run for Congress and create a district from which he could run from. And they had the support of the current congressman. I can't think of his name right now, but he was a good man. I think he was a Jewish white man, always spoken very highly of from both my uncle and my father. And so that's how we are today, where you have Chantel Brown now representing the district.
So let me ask you, because you just told us how it was, and from your perspective, how you viewed your father.
Oh,
yeah. Let's talk about, how did you view your uncle? How was y'all growing up and going through that? Because everybody's uncle is different, and you got different uncles too. Everybody got the uncle, then you got the uncle, then you got the uncle, right? How did Lou fall in line in that?
That's my second father. Number one, when my father died, I was probably about 25, 26.
Okay.
And I had just come through some street stuff, but I was in college on basketball scholarship and finishing up in San Diego at the time.
Okay.
But my uncle took it from there. So the only real difference between the two is a sense that my uncle had the chance to grow with me through when I entered into my career and throughout my career, and then until the time that in 2015 of August that he died at 90 years of age.
Wow.
So from 25, of course, he had the numbers. But prior to give you a little bit more texture, with my father, I really enjoyed the time of him as a newscaster, his political activities post-mayor, the teaching of just traveling, enjoying life, the things that he was interested in from Studio 54 on down to when we would have to come back to Cleveland, whether it was for funerals, whether it was John Little, former councilman, what's my guy, and I should be shot for this, the councilman, Charlie Carr.
That's correct.
Coming back for things of that sort. But on top of that, more importantly, Ken, was with the establishment of the 21st Congressional District Caucus, as good as it looked when Anna Chapman was running it, there was a lot of underneath politicking going on amongst many of the leaders that we know, whether it's from Arnold Pinckney to George Forbes to my father to my uncle and many others. As fantastic as it was, you still had the underbellies of issues. And as my father would often say, come on, we need to go back to Cleveland. I got to check on Lou. And so that meant in our household that we had to come back here for him to do whatever politicking he needed to do with my uncle in order to deal with whatever the issues might have been. But last point.
Go ahead.
But it was when I returned here to Cleveland that my uncle being in power in Congress, I would always travel with him. I would go back to D.C. I'd be here in the city when he'd come in and travel with him and Big Art Nooks, if you remember Big Art. And then we would do the caucus picnic and then all the other politicking, church to church and the whole nine, listening and understanding. And that's when you had the Jessies and everybody else very in tune, very attached, very involved in it. And if you remember, I don't think you would remember, but up on South Woodland and Lee Road, there was a good family. And as a matter of fact, they're buried within about 15 feet from my father currently at Lakeview, Johnny and Katie Walker. That home right there was the home where all the politicking used to take place. The Jessies and everybody would come in town, or your local politicians. When they needed to take care of some business and have conversations, it was at the home on South Woodland and Lee Road at Johnny and Katie Walker's.
So let me ask you a question as it relates to the two in their styles. Let's talk about just pure styles. Your dad's style and the way he approached people and the way he did things, and strategically, from what I read and looked at and hear, strategically put things in place to set the table that even opened up opportunities for his brother to become Congress and other things of that. What was the difference in their style, you would say, between they brothers? And I know that you grow. So what were the difference between the two that people would say? From your perspective. Other people got their own perspective. You talk to Lenny Powell, she says, oh, Carl is this way and Louis. But from you knew these guys. What was your perspective from that? What was the difference in those two, you would say?
The one thing I would tell you is you have to take it from youth. My father was directly attached to wanting to enjoy, whether it was pool, dealing with my uncle.
He was older than your uncle?
No, my uncle was 2 years older. He
So your uncle was the older brother.
Right.
Okay.
People sometimes, they just always feud. Carl, Louis, Carl and Louis. First of all, Louis, he said, I'm born first.
Yes, because you would think that. That's why I was like, he was the older brother. Yeah. No, he wasn't. Okay.
I used to always just joke. I say it's the alphabet. Carl before, and we joke about it.
I got you.
But it's totally, listen, my father, I don't have to explain much more. Those that understood, and you saw it when he was mayor. Harlell Jones, he was attached to the streets and the whole nine. And his whole concept was about black political power. Civil rights and all of that had its place. He learned first from John O'Holly.
Okay.
Now, do I have to explain John O'Holly?
Good, Cordell. I got millions of people who watch my program, and they don't know you like I know you. That's why I want you to give us this history.
Right.
Go ahead.
John O'Holly was a gentleman that down in the projects eventually started his organization in which they would do protesting, etc., against the business owners in the community who would not hire people that look like us. If we can't work, then there's no need for us to buy. But he was also attached to the political establishment of that day. And my father was his driver. And in driving, he was mentored. And from there, my father went on to be very concerned about politics. Obviously, we can go right back. He dropped out of high school. He went into the service. When he came back from the service, it was almost disrespectful to him to be 20-something years of age, having dealt with women, smoking cigarettes, drinking liquor, traveling around in the service, and having to come back to finish high school with kids that haven't even been outside the neighborhood. But he dealt with it and got done. But he was also a boxer.
Okay.
Which took him into West Virginia State University, College, West Virginia College, down in Institute, West Virginia. And it was there that he was the middleweight champion with their team. I think it was around 48, 49. But there was a professor there who actually told him, this is not the place for you. This is the place where you need to be leaving and dealing with the real world of interacting with a collegiate level of people that are white and black and what the real world will reflect. And he did that. That's how he ended up in Minnesota. But getting back to the genre of your question, he had a mindset of wanting to be political, making a change, looking at civil rights and saying the only way we're going to be able to actually do something to really effectuate change where we can control some of that change was we either had to take City Hall or the governorship. Because when you get those positions, what do you have the power to do? Appoint people. And hopefully you appoint people that would be able to deal with the issues and push the agenda, which is what he wanted, which was allowing not white bankers come to the table, but black bankers come to the table. Appointing people in certain cabinet positions to deal with issues that would be important to enhancing the lifestyle of the community. With my uncle, a very serious man, very jovial, always had a ball with him. But when it came down to his transition from his love of legal work and taking on the ability to run for Congress and eventually become the first Ohio black congressman, he was a serious, not that my father wasn't serious.
No, I understand. No.
My uncle was a very serious man when it came down to doing business. And he exacted that upon me about when it was time for me to do business. He made it very clear. You don't play around with people's money. You don't put yourself in a position of going to jail. And I'm talking about in the political game. And you represent people's interests for where they are. And in his particular situation, it was around healthcare, veterans, housing, things of that sort, poverty. And obviously you saw the longevity of his career. Many of the things you see here in the city of Cleveland would not have been done, especially when he was a cardinal, which means he was the chair of multiple appropriation committees.
So explain to people about that.
He had HUD,
Okay.
he had veterans, and of course he was chair of appropriations,
So he was chairing 3 committees.
which they called a cardinal.
Wow.
And that's how we got a lot of money here and around the country. I don't know anyone who's black that
Got that
has
much.
more buildings named after him.
No, there's nothing else we can name in the city.
Yeah,
because-
just nothing. And I used to tell, hey, we used to be rolling. I used to say, hey, man, I might fly in, talking about we going to have this. I said, listen, I know we know somebody else.
Oh, no. It ain't nothing. Trust me.
It's
Hey,
coming.
you got a long list of people. You got
It's
Mr.
coming.
Forbes, you got Frank,
It's coming.
you got a whole lot of people out here. Can I get some names? Everything is named after the Stokes.
But there's-
Let's talk a little bit about this, and we're going to get into some other discussion. The Stokes brothers and the promise of black men. There was an article put out earlier this week that's talking about that and going into Antoine Seawright actually wrote an article in regards to about the situation as it relates to the Stokes brothers and black men and everything that's going on. So once you update the public, is there anything that's going on with the foundations or anything that we need to know that you want to bring to light to anybody at this point in time?
I do humbly want to say this. We just talked about the naming of buildings
Okay.
and many other accolades that the city of Cleveland, its officials, and its people have supported and allowed to take place in recognition of the leadership of the two. And we're very grateful for that. I think the finale now is what we're going through now. It's called the Stokes Project.
Okay.
And this is really a citywide effort that is the epitome. Outside of what Dr. Alex Johnson from Tri-C led a few years ago about the 50th anniversary, which was extraordinary, if you recall. It was a citywide effort of celebration from elementary school to college to nonprofit to private sector and the whole nine. But this is a little bit more personal. And this goes back to people serving in government. Now, normally when you talk about people serving in government, you don't think about people making money, right? Even though we've had some skewing of that over the last decade or more. Or as Congress, Senate, many times you have millionaires, right? In this case, my father, who went on from being mayor, judge, ambassador of the Seychelles Islands, he didn't make money. He didn't get a chance to get out into the private sector to flip what we would do or what we have done in our sets. As you and I, we've made our little change because of the way we've parlayed the system and understanding how to maneuver the system. But we do our work. At the end of the day, we're not going to get paid if we're not producing.
He just didn't get a chance to benefit.
No, he just didn't get the chance in '96.
Wow.
When he
was started to get to him, he was 96.
Yeah, he was. No, this is 1996.
Oh, you said this was in 96. Okay.
Yeah, no, he was 69 years old.
69, okay.
So he came back from the Seychelles Islands in order to have Cleveland Clinic deal with his ailment, which was esophageal cancer. And, of course, today they're further ahead with the esophageal cancer. But at that time, and I returned here from Phoenix, Arizona at the time for 30 days to be with him until he died. But the point is, he had his insurance, whatever it was. And when he was buried, in the namesake of people of his quote-unquote stature, first black mayor of a major, and if you look at Maynard Jackson, you look at Richard Hatcher, you look at Ken Gibson, or anybody's, what's my man out in L.A., was it Jackson? Who was the mayor? Tom Bradley.
Okay.
Tom Bradley. You look at some of their tombstones, it's much more prominent, right? Just looking at it from that standpoint. Here at Lakeview Cemetery, and I want to thank the Western Historical Society, I want to thank Lakeview Cemetery for their effort. They're all on board. Western Historical Society is the fiscal agent. Lakeview Cemetery is behind in putting in-kind services and leading the effort on what we're doing under the project management team of Bob Render, RLR, and that is Vicki Dansby, Rhonda Crowder, and Barbara Brown, and their team, who have been taking this leadership on for the last year or so in order to erect and support a more respectful type of burial site for my father. So it's more of a memorial.
That's excellent.
An erection of a monument that would be indicative of others around the country or similar. And then it's a three-pronged scenario. There's a Stokes room over at the Caramoo Center where there's a lot of his memorabilia and all of that's available to the public. We want to enhance that. And then the digitization of his papers, which nowadays in 2024, 2025, obviously that's necessary to help the public as they're doing research in college and everything else to have greater access to it. So it's a three-prong approach. And I'm going to say this here. Council President Blaine Griffin, my main man, and I'm going to tell you, Councilman Richard Starr, those two right there are my heart.
Okay.
They are in the gap, trying to help move this agenda forward through City Council, which is appropriate. But then I'm going to tell you this here, and as somebody I was in opposition to, as well as you were, for the mayor's race, which was Mayor Bibb. And it's interesting. Sometimes when you don't, one thing I didn't do when I would be interviewed by the news and all of that, I'd always make it very clear. Kevin Kelly was a friend. Kevin Kelly was someone I knew I could do business with, the council president, someone who has helped me and supported me on my objectives with my clients who were directly impacting minorities and women and the whole nine. So I had no other fear of support. I know you were Bashir. Good. I know he went through his thing. Good brother. That's for his own deal to deal with. But me and him, we was good as individuals. No long history, but I know that was your boy.
Yeah.
And he became a good friend of mine for time. But I'm going to tell you, I always made the statement. I was really looking at experience, someone I already knew that if there were agenda items that we needed to bring to the table, like Norm Edwards or others, even though Norm was with Glade Shoemate and others that were important to the community, that Kevin Kelly was there, he would be available. That was my mindset, to take on the challenge. And I just felt that Mayor Bibb at the time, who I did not have any history, was not aware that he would have the capacity to do what I have observed him to be doing. Because here's one thing I want to make sure. Mayor Bibb is doing something that no one else in this city is about to do. And he is throwing his full support behind what he's going to do for my father's three-pronged project. And he is being unapologetic about it. And I respect that. But here's one thing I want people to appreciate. When my father became mayor, he didn't understand a damn thing what it was going to be like going in. He had an idea, but when you get in that city hall, it ain't no joke. And time showed it. History could reveal it. Same thing with Mayor Bibb.
So let's talk about the project. Is there any way that the public can get involved if they want to try to donate or do something to help with the cause? Is there a website or something they can go to for that?
Yes, of course. As a matter of fact, I put $10,000 of my own money down on the project prior to let people know that we're coming for an ask, that I'm all in from our family standpoint. We did do a breakfast last year, and right now Mayor Bibb is doing a private event coming up later on this month, and then Councilman Richard Starr is doing his business through City Council. We've already had great support. Former County Council President Cordell Jones and Councilwoman Meredith Turner have already committed over $10,000 themselves to the project. Don't quote me if I had those numbers wrong, but they did put the money in there right off the top, no question asked. And so if you do want to get involved, the Western Historical Society, if you go to their website, which I don't have off the top of my
We'll leave that in the description. When you go to our description of this video, we'll have in there where you can do. But Cordell is saying the Western Historical Society, you should be able to go to their website and get some information about it there.
Right.
Okay.
And one last thing. Let me tell you who was right at the forefront of this, right off the top. And what we're doing today actually started prior to, and that is Tim Tramble. You know my man Tim?
I know Tim. Yeah, Tim been on the show.
And Tim is the president or executive director of the St. Luke's Foundation. Man, Tim, as a Huff native, came through economic development, Burton Bell Carr and the whole nine. One of the most prolific and smartest young businessmen in this city. Man, they're the ones that have put up the original monies in order to ensure that monument is being built.
That's huge.
Tim, and I love Tim.
So shouts out to Tim Tramble.
Tim Tramble, to my main man.
Shouts out to
Tim Tramble and his family.
And his family for doing all that they do to help keep the dream alive. And that's huge for us. So, Cordell, I want you to, because we're rounding third, that was our note to let we round third. I want to go through what you're doing now. I know that you had left here and you went to Vegas. You was doing all kinds of work there and all around the country, doing everything else. Give us in a nutshell, what is Cordell Stokes up to these days? What do you do in the name of your business? And give us some idea what's going on with you.
Sure, I appreciate that. Originally, my business was built on helping companies expand into Las Vegas, Phoenix, Arizona, areas that at that time, as you already know, we become a great big sports town in Las Vegas. And I don't want to get into the weeds about how we got there, but the point is that was the goal, helping people come into the city, help cut a lot of red tape in order for them to be able to do business in the city and bring minority content to the table. That's all it was. Now, being back here in Cleveland, last couple of years, I had to take care of my mother,
Okay.
And she subsequently, I buried her last year, put that to bed.
I had the pleasure of meeting your mom.
Oh,
I remember you brought her up here.
Oh, yeah.
Was it here or
No,
one of the
not
other?
here. It
At
was
the other office.
At the other office.
Yeah, your mom came by and you spent
That's
the
when
afternoon
you was
with
over
me
there
on Prospect.
On Prospect.
Yeah, you brought your mom over. We spent the afternoon.
Yeah,
Sure
we
did.
did.
I remember that. You sure did. You brought her over.
Because you said we were doing a meeting. I told my mother, I said, listen, you got to roll with me.
Yeah, roll with me. And she spent there the whole meeting. While we been, you met the whole meeting. I met your mom. I sure did. I got an opportunity to meet her before she passed. That's great.
That's right. Outside of that, I've been very fortunate because I knew I've always done business here in the city of Cleveland, whether working and representing with the Urban League, working with Construction Employers Association, Tim Linville, Glenn Shoemate, helping with the recruitment of individuals into the union construction industry, etc. But right now, I was introduced, even though we had an acquaintance in between us, Dave Meganhart, who you know from United Labor Agency, who is the executive director, and you know their work in the community.
That's correct.
And they have been the primary provider of workforce development services, of job and training services. They were doing the business to business, but now they're primarily involved in the direct involvement of individuals looking to establish a career, and that's through their job and training services. If you recall, just give some history. Back in 2000, when I returned here, Jane Campbell, Jimmy DeMore, and Tim McCormick were the three-county commissioners. You remember we always had, whatever agendas we had to do, we had to go before the commissioners.
That's correct.
And you were over there as a director for Pat O'Malley, the Cuyahoga County recorder. And that's how we got connected. The county was totally different. Now, we had the Job Training Partnership Act and all of that. But in 2000, that was the very first time that the county established the County Workforce Development Department, in which they had tapped Don Singer, now deceased, and Jerry Slade as his assistant director to man what was called the Cuyahoga County Department of Workforce Development. So there was a small team of us, maybe about 12 or so individuals, some who are still around here. And then the city of Cleveland had theirs. This was under the Workforce Investment Act of 1998, even though it was 2000, but that was the legislation. In 2002, I returned to Las Vegas to head up their workforce agency. And
excuse me, what's wrong? That battery keep going down? Like the third time you changed it. Is you getting a good battery? They shouldn't be going dead after 5-6 minutes. What you putting in there is still a dead battery then.
Charging up as much as you can, making it happen.
The reason why I'm saying that, man, I think I'm gonna end up getting some new cameras because you shouldn't have to keep getting refocusing and changing batteries in the middle of the program. They should be able to make it through. We ain't even been on an hour yet, and you done did it 3 times.
Full, but then so now this one, we kind of started,
We'll deal.
30, 40 minutes after.
Okay, we'll deal with it. All right, we was talking about Megan Hart and that.
yeah, initially this was under Armin Budish's leadership, and you were doing some contracting with the county, and we were complementing, I think, one another and supporting as necessary. But at that time, it was called the Central Neighborhood Initiative, in which there was an attempt to really delve into the Ward 5 area, the Central Neighborhood, trying to enhance them with job training services and the multitude. Even just read a hell of an article about Digital C today. I don't know the gentleman. That's the CEO. Justin.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know him.
He's been on the show. He's a good dude.
Yeah. No, it was a hell of an article because he has to go before council to make sure about his performance measurements and them being able to get as much money as possible back into the coffers to pay people and continue on the process. So that was what was going on. But then as Michelle Rose was hired as a part of the cabinet to Mayor Bibb over Ohio Means Jobs. And at that time, compared to back in 2000, where we were separate entities, by the time I left in 2002 to return west, they had combined to form Ohio Means Jobs. But they were in the conversations at the time I was there. But now you had that come together, correct?
Okay.
But now, moving forward, as of July of last year, in which it was a very smart move because of their alliance strictly with the city and the county, now they are a nonprofit, which gives them the ability to raise money in a whole different perspective compared to when they were city county.
So they're not a quasi-governmental agency no more.
Let me say this, because and I want to be very careful. It's now called Greater Cleveland Works.
Not Ohio Means Jobs.
Ohio Means Jobs is still interplay, but the point is as a name. But it's Greater Cleveland Works is the nonprofit, the Workforce Development Board for Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, which means that they are the entity that receives, whether it's federal money or any other monies that they will raise, in order to exact that money out or allocate that money out onto the street to the sphere
is
of
Ohio Means
organizations
Jobs
that
one
do
of those
job training.
organizations that they give the money to?
It comes into Greater Cleveland Works at this point.
And does Works
That is
give
going
money
to be the
to
greater, that entity itself will
allocate
give the
money.
money into the United Labor Agencies and other entities who are eligible
No,
to
I
receive.
understand. I totally get it.
workforce
I
money.
just wanted to.
And these are federal dollars.
Only reason why I'm asking the question the way I'm asking is that Ohio Means Jobs still exists.
It does.
Okay, and this other entity is just a nonprofit entity that's going to be doing funding that can help support some of those other
That
agencies.
is the main conduit
That's good.
of
Okay,
receiving the federal dollars in order to
because
get
they
that
need to
money
be a
out into-
nonprofit organization to get that done.
You don't have to.
In order to get the
Initially,
funds they looking for, they had to be.
the
That's
thing-
why they did it.
This is it. Well, you're talking
I mean,
about
you know.
you have the ability to raise more money now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you have a lot more freedom.
They get more
but
freedom.
you're still associated with the city and,
Yeah.
and the county.
I got it. So they got the city opened up his own nonprofit.
Yeah, but more importantly, the thing that I'm more concentrated on is the Built Environment Program.
And the Built
that's-
Environment Program is?
If you remember the Fannie Lewis Law, former councilwoman, now deceased, if you remember during that time, that enforced developers and other contractors doing business in the city of Cleveland that they had to hire a certain amount of residents in the city of Cleveland.
That's correct.
Political forces eliminated that.
Eliminated. Correct.
Okay, not too long ago. With Council President Blaine Griffin, the mayor, city council, they approved the community benefits agreement.
That's correct.
Now, under that initiative, the Built Environment Program, which is only one of two programs in the country, one other being in Oregon. I don't know what city, but this gives us an opportunity that allows us to build the capacity of talent that would fit into the union construction industry and other like industries that would be able to utilize that talent. Where we now have $1 million of supportive services, where when you come through the initial Ohio Means Jobs or what we knew it to be back in our day, you were talking about bus tickets, sometimes rental assistance here or mortgage, sometimes this or that. They are now really delving into hitting the core issues. You might need help with your car, maybe a purchase of a new car, home. They are really drilling down to eliminate the barriers. And of course, the organizations such as the Urban League, Tri-C, Towards Employment, Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, and their entities that come up under them, and other Hard-Headed Women, or HHW Ohio now as their name. These entities received some of the ARPA money, the $10 million that the mayor and the city council approved, in order to utilize their services to help individuals get into these sustaining industries, which is very important. Now, this is totally separate from what I'm talking about, your job and training services. You can go into Greater Cleveland Works, Ohio Means Jobs, see a caseworker, or work through the process, get support to go into the health industry, IT industry, transportation industry. But this program here specifically is targeting industries that are complementary of the trades. And what we're talking about is for ex-offenders in particular. Now, I'm not talking about, that's not the totality of it.
No, I understand. But if
But
you
what
were,
I'm saying, if you're, and as I always say, I don't care if you're a 2-time sex offender, 2-time murder, 2-time burglar, whatever you want to consider it, as long as you're out on the street and you have the prerequisites and you're willing to do the work, you never have to look back because you're making 19 plus an hour to start, benefits, retirement, and the whole nine.
interesting.
Yeah, very good.
So, Cordell, we get ready to round out of here and get you out of here, sir. Let's talk about this. We was talking about the built environment. This is like an event you got coming up on the 28th of January. Let's talk a little bit about, you want to tell everybody what this is and what you guys got going on with this and whatnot?
Sure. Through the built environment, as we stated, it was initially you had the Fannie Lewis law. Now you have the community benefits agreement. It is really a city initiative. However, everyone is allowed to come to the events. But we typically go ward to ward, certain wards.
That's right.
Get on in throughout the city of Cleveland, west side, east side, in order to attract Cleveland talent. But, of course, county talent is welcome. And this year, we're very fortunate. I talked with the Congresswoman last year at her fundraiser. I think that was, you and I were together there. What was that, in November?
November.
October.
October. Yeah, October.
We had a good time there. And the Congresswoman said, you already know, because she's worked with me before, tells the homegirl, good people. And so we finally got it together. And so we're going to kick off 2025 on Tuesday, January 28th, 5 to 7. And, of course, who's hosting us? Our homegirl, Lane Golston, up at Harvard Community Services Center, up in Joe Jones's ward. And shout out to Joe. We always work with Joe, and we'll be back to him. But this will be good. This will be good for the district, and we want them to come on out.
Tuesday, January 28th from 5 to 7 at Harvard Community Center. Build Environment Job Training Fair. Cordell Stokes will be there and many other people from the community to be there to talk about jobs. Louis Moore.
You already know Louis is my ace boo cool.
Yeah, he will be there in the place to be. Everybody there. If you're looking for a job, you're looking for some employment. If you got some employment and you're looking for just other opportunities, you want to think if you can do better, there's employers who will be there. And these are not just jobs that you can walk in and say they low-ranking jobs. You may go in there and doing something and find out there may be some other opportunity within that employment that they just didn't have listed there that you can get in. So it's worth going in. If you're looking for employment, please do. January 28th from 5 to 7 at the Harvard Community Center.
And if I may, I want everyone to understand, while this may be a specific initiative, each of the entities that are involved in this program, they still have their own services that they offer and deliver. While we may have a heavy concentration on trying to get you into the trades or complementary type of industry, you still have, if you're a business owner, the Urban League and other organizations have services to support you there.
That's correct.
If you need expungement services, if you need this or that, these organizations are available to utilize the services that they already have existing that are in addition to what is available through the Built Environment funding model.
People who will be there, it looks like we have Towards Employment, Ohio Cleveland Works, Cleveland Built, Urban League. Who is HHW?
Tracy, yep. That was formerly Hard-Hatted Women.
Hard-Hatted Women,
Yep.
Okay, and Tracy?
And we'll be, Louis and I will be on, I'll be at the radio show Thursday.
Okay.
Burton Bell Car.
Excellent.
For that. Urban League, Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, and there's several entities up under them. And Towards Employment, as you said. And, of course, Ohio Means Jobs.
Jobs.
Greater Cleveland Works. There to help do the business of servicing the public, job and training services. No financial obligation on their part. This is money through the Department of Labor and other resources that need to be spent in the community. We do not want to give any of that money back.
Okay.
If we do, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
That's a problem.
As many people need jobs out here, and it's no sense for you not to go.
That's right.
So, hey, we want everybody to make sure you be there Tuesday the 28th, 5 to 7, Harvard Community Center, Build Employment Job Fair. Cordell, we want to thank you for coming on the program, brother. You did an excellent job in educating us. We're going to have you back, as always, to have our conversation. We're going to do a strategic move after dark, so we can really have a good time. And that's where you're going to really want to watch that one.
That's right.
And we're going to get
make
that
happen.
So, Cordell, like we do on every show before we get ready to go, we give you an opportunity to look right into this camera here, and you get to say whatever you want to say, man, whatever on your heart you want to give to the people. We already reminded them about that. All the information that you're looking for of how you can get in touch with Cleveland Works and any of the other programs we talked about, we will leave those links in the description so that you'll be able to get that information there. Cordell, take your time, whatever you want to say. It don't have to be long, it can be short, but this is a camera for you. Whatever's on your heart you want to give to the millions of people who watch my show every week.
Is this in Africa too?
It's all over the world.
I was watching a special in Tanzania, but the only thing I just want to
look
do,
right into this camera. This is you.
The only thing I just want to do is on behalf of the Carl and Louis Stokes family and all of the extended family members, we just want to thank you for the support that you all have provided. Even those that did not support the Stokes family, but lived through whatever the leadership took us through. And those that are in support of the Stokes Project moving forward, we want to thank you very much. We encourage you to be a part of the process. And Kenny, I want to say thank you to you. I'm very proud of you and your family and all of our extended brothers and sisters that we can go through it, from Blaine to Zach Reed, Angela Woodson. We can go through the whole nine. And I think this is just a humbling moment to be able to sit down, have a conversation in public, because we typically do this privately.
That's correct.
And so thank you very much, and I'm here to be of service to the best of my ability and my capacity. So thank you very much.
Hey, I appreciate you coming on the show. That is Cordell Stokes.
All right.
Stokes has always been for folks.
That was the original
That's
two
the original
right there.
two
That's
right there, y'all. Hey, I want to thank
Kevin
you guys
Conwell.
for watching the program.
All
All
right.
right, we will see y'all later. Thanks. Good job, Cordell.